Do you want to find better buyers and weed out all of the crappy leads that are wasting your time? Then be sure to ask the 9 qualification questions that we're going to cover in this very video on your next discovery call. Each one of these questions falls into one of 8 different sections of what I call the diagnosis call process. They are uncovering pain, timeframes, confirming fit, calculating ROI, understanding the buying process, agreeing budget, identifying the champion, and then getting agreement from the buyer. Now, these diagnosis calls, this process that I teach over at salesman.com in salesman.com Academy and in the free book, which you can find over at salesman.com, Selling Made Simple, do something slightly different than the traditional diagnosis call. What a diagnosis call does that a typical discovery call doesn't is that it covers both discovery but also qualification, product positioning, micro closing, and it allows you up to ask for the close in one call rather than doing this over multiple different engagements with a prospect. You can learn more about all of this in the free book that you can get over at salesman.com, but now let's get into the questions themselves. So the very first category of questions you need to be asking during your qualification calls is probably the most important, and this is uncovering pain. So does your prospect actually have a problem, and are they in enough pain to drive the amount of urgency that's needed to help them make a purchase decision? You essentially need a yes to both of these questions that we're going to cover. A yes to both of these variables is downright necessary. And to get to the bottom of it, you can ask these 2 questions. You booked in this call with me today? What led you to getting this call booked in? You're trying to understand what is the main reason that they're talking with you right now. And of course, after asking this question, you're going to have to do a little bit more digging, but even the most tight-lipped of buyers are still going to give you a kernel of truth in a response to that question. And the second question you need to ask is, what's stopping you from solving this issue yourself? And this is one of my absolute favorite follow-up questions to the previous question that we just went through. Not only does this question uncover any roadblocks to implementation that you may hit further down the road, but also gives you a clear idea of how big the problem is for the buyer. Because if this really was a big problem, the buyer should have been working to try and solve it themselves, and now they've come to you because they can't get it done. And that leads us on to the next category of questions, and that is timeframes. Now, not all timeframes are going to line up, and this should be one of your chief concerns when trying to qualify whether a prospect's timeline of getting a product or service bought and implemented matches your own. When do they want this problem solved? Today, this quarter, 15 years from now, who knows? And as a general rule of thumb, the buyers you want to work with should be the ones that want to solve their problems quickly, because if they don't have that urgency, they're not going to be compelled to act. And that's going to mean feet dragging, they're going to not show up to meetings, they're going to ghost your email messages, and it's going to be a complete waste of your time. So make sure to ask the question, when does this issue need to be solved by? This is straightforward. It's a no bullshit timeline question that you can use to assess whether your time frame matches up with the prospect's time frame. The next section of the call we need to cover is confirming the fit. And for this category of questions, you need to ask this to yourself rather than asking it to the buyer. Ask yourself the question, do I actually have the solution for this buyer's problem? And honesty is key here. The best performing reps don't oversell their product's capabilities. Why? Because a dissatisfied customer becomes a pain in the arse. They're never going to upsell. They're never going to convert into bigger, larger, more exciting deals. They're never going to give you referrals, and they're just going to pester you and annoy you and become a customer service nightmare. So think long and hard about whether you can actually solve the problem that the buyer has. It's a question that you shouldn't have to ask yourself. This should come naturally, organically, but in the modern world of B2B sales, it's something that is valuable to implement for a lot of sellers. Then the next category is calculating the ROI of the problem that you can solve. Because no matter how big or small, every new solution is going to take a little bit of effort for the buyer to implement. Buyers need to change vendors, hire new staff, train the team on a novel new system. They need to fight or gather or change the budget. This is all a little bit of hassle and pressure and stress before they ever get to the value that your product offers them. The question your buyer is asking themselves is the value that your solution offers over the medium to long term worth this initial discomfort? How much are they going to have to change to accommodate it? And when all is said and done, are they going to look back on this investment of time, energy, resources as a good one or a negative one? So you don't want them to do this on their own. You want to help them through that process of uncovering the ROI of working with you medium to long term on your diagnosis call or your discovery call. Then obviously you can nudge them one way or another if they start going off the rails, off the wrong tracks as to the ROI that's going to be delivered. So we're going to ask the question, how would things be different if we solved this for you. We want to uncover what's actually going to change for the buyer once they implement your solution. Is it a simple quality of life difference? Or does it lead to a real change for the fundamentals of the business long term? It's one thing for you to say that the ROI is X, whether that be revenue, dollars, time saved. It's quite another for the buyer to turn around and say, no, actually, what I'm going to get is this, and I value that more. You want to get the ROI calculation coming from the buyer, so then you can document it down and you can share it repeatedly throughout the sales process if you ever fall into any friction or any issues. And this one is key because no matter how well you think that you know your industry, the buyers within it, well, every business is going to be different. And again, the buyer might give you the ROI in a different way than what you've communicated it to them. And we always want to speak in the language that the buyer communicates in. That's our job. After that comes understanding the buyer's process. So we've got to be sure that your buyer is willing to adapt to your selling process and that you understand the buying process so that you can go through it seamlessly and rapidly. And to get to the bottom of all this, you just ask the question, when your organization has done similar projects to this in the past, what processes need to be put in place, what buying process needs to happen to get this product or service implemented. And this question is going to give you a real clear idea of what lies ahead for both you and the buyer for you to get this product or service implemented so that they can see the value that we're pitching them in all of these points of communication. It'll help you understand how much work you're going to have to do to get the team trained up to speak to that procurement individual who seemingly is a massive pain in the ass, to do the paperwork, to get the budget, all of the prerequisite steps that you need to get a deal done. It's far better to understand these steps of the buyer's journey at the top of the process than find out halfway through that there's 15 more people that you need to engage with. And that leads us on to the money side of things, the next step of the process, which is agreeing budget. And as Experiment 27 founder Alex Berman told me in a recent interview.
So I just searched like best SEO Lawrence, Kansas, and there was like a list of 10. And I filled out the contact info on all 10. And then whoever called me first, I worked with like whatever the third guy I think was that called me. So it's like, that's what your buyers are dealing with. If they have budget and they're ready to buy, it's very easy to close them.
For whatever reason, I think this is an issue with people having weird beliefs and psychology about money. But with that said, it is the reality that we live in. Talking about budget can be a touchy subject with some people, which is why you may want to avoid talking about budget until later in the sales process. But that is dumb. You need to be 100% clear whether the prospect has the funds to pay for your solution at the top of the sales process. Otherwise, what are we doing here? We're just having a bunch of conversations with people that are never going to be able to give us revenue. It's not a good use of your time as an individual contributor who wants to make some money via commissions. It's also not a good use of your company's time speaking to randomers that are never going to make a purchase. So with this being, for some people, a touchy subject, a good way to frame this up and a good question to ask is, how are projects like this typically funded? So we're not being direct to someone's face, unless you feel it's appropriate to do so. I will ask this question more times than not, but we're not necessarily asking the question, do you have the X $1,000 to get this over the line? The question of how are projects like this usually funded is a softer way to start those budget conversations. With this open-ended question, you're going to get a better idea of how many hoops your buyer's going to have to jump through to get proper funding. And also, if you listen to the answer and if you listen to the subtleties within it, you're going to have a better idea if they are the final decision maker or if you're going to have to loop in a different department head, an executive, or whoever it is before the final yes or no decision can be made. So only a couple more questions and a couple more sections of a diagnosis call that we need to get through here. The next one is identifying the champion within the account. Now, your buyer's decision is going to be influenced by a number of individuals within the business. It could be a head of department, a higher up in the C-suite, even an influential team member or end user of the product or service. That's why it's important to figure out who those individuals are, and if they are positive to our cause, we call them champions. And as a side note here, if you're doing large, complex B2B deals and there are seemingly no champions, no one who is shouting your praises internally, even at the top of the sales process as you go through this diagnosis call with the prospect, then the buyer's probably price shopping you. They're probably not that interested. They're probably just gathering information, or you're not dealing with the person who's actually going to make the decision. You're dealing with someone who's 15 steps below them who is never going to make the decision. And they're just, again, gathering information to pass it up to the actual decision maker themselves. So listen carefully as you ask the question. If you were to make a purchase decision, who else would help with that process? And this question is formulated, again, subtly, that if you aren't dealing with the end decision maker and you need to be dealing with them, you're not going to piss off the person you're asking the question to. You're not going to dent their ego too much. Because after all, no one likes to feel like they're not in charge. No one wants to be the bitch during the buying process, even if that's what they actually are. And then finally, the last section of your diagnosis call is getting agreement. And this is up to you to get a verbal commitment on this call. Otherwise, it's been a waste of everyone's time. Otherwise, the buyers are liable to walk away after weeks or even months of your hard work. You have to get verbal commitments. I call it micro-closing. Again, we cover micro-closing in the book, Selling It Made Simple, which you can find over at salesman.com completely for free. We cover it on this YouTube channel as well, right? But micro-closing throughout the entirety of the sales process, from call to call, from conversation to conversation, is absolutely essential to getting complex B2B sales done. So towards the end of the diagnosis call, we're going to ask the question, you're a good fit to work with us. So we'll start with a statement. If we can solve X, will you commit to Y? So we're not necessarily saying you're a good fit to work with us over at Salesman.com Academy with our sales training program. If I can help you 2x your revenue this year, will you commit to getting started today? If you're selling to an individual or a small business owner, that might be an absolutely appropriate question to ask. But typically, if you're doing larger, complex B2B deals where there's multiple decision makers, there's multiple stakeholders, what you're trying to do here is get the next step of the process booked in the diary. So if I can help you solve X, will you get Barry on a quick call next week? Will you send me this bit of information that I need just to confirm the ROI that we can generate? If I do this, will you do that? We absolutely need a micro close like this towards the end of every single call that we do. Never mind just the diagnosis calls that we're running through in this video. So there you have it, 9 probing questions that you should be asking in every single one of your discovery calls, or as we teach over at Salesman.com Academy, your diagnosis calls. And if you ask each one of these questions, you're going to have all the intel that you need to know to qualify whether the prospect that you're speaking to is a picture perfect fit or a gross fish that you don't want to eat and you should throw back into the sea. And if you enjoyed this video, why not click the video that's on the screen right now and continue making selling simple.